Well folks, it's finally here. After weeks and weeks of up and down programming across Nitro and Thunder, not to mention a couple of hit or miss pay-per-views along the way, it's time for the final pay-per-view in WCW history, something that only the company knew at the time. I'm talking about Greed from March 18th, 2001 at the Jacksonville Coliseum in Jacksonville, Florida. This show was nominated by a ton of Patreon backers: Warren Mapp, Liam Roberge, Nick Brown, Cam Boland, Amber Wilborn, Jack Dover, CJ Haas, Mike Ryan, John Feuerhelm, Ryan Tapsell, John the Wolverine, Shi Wudan, Rock Rauderkus, great name, and James Davey over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. 5,030 people in the Coliseum, 50,000 pay-per-view buys. It's tied with Starrcade 2000 as the lowest bought pay-per-view in WCW history, unless you count Starrcade 87, but in fairness, that was partly a result of sabotage by the World Wrestling Federation. Tony Schiavone and Scott Hudson are on commentary, and before I go any further into the details and the minutia of this particular show, we gotta talk about what's going on in WCW at this moment, like literally, because one day, I'm talking one day before this pay-per-view, it's announced that Turner Broadcasting is no longer going to carry Nitro and Thunder as of the end of March, which throws a wrench into everything, because it's well known that Fusion Media, a group headed by Eric Bischoff, was planning on purchasing WCW, with Turner retaining a minority interest in the company, and these were the new owners who were frequently mentioned on TV for weeks ever since January. The plan for WCW was soon after this show, the new owners had come in, they had announced basically everything go on hiatus for a while, like an intentional grounding of programming and storylines, a completely fresh reboot with a completely new look, WCW The Big Bang, happening in May of that year. But then TBS canceled WCW for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons was, partly WCW didn't fit the image of what AOL Time Warner wanted on their networks. And honestly, there was no overlap or crossover in terms of demographic and fan bases. The wrestling fans didn't watch any of the programming on the Turner networks before or after their shows, and vice versa. The other Turner viewers didn't watch wrestling, so those didn't really gel well. And as popular as wrestling was at the time, and as many viewers as WCW, even at this point, we're still getting, wrestling still not advertiser friendly, so that was kind of a no-no for Turner as well. Also, and something people don't talk about as much, is that Fusion Media really wanted this guaranteed time slot for their show, and Turner didn't really want to give that to them. So all these different factors ultimately led to Turner shutting down, running the WCW shows. It's not just because, they didn't think wrestling was highbrow enough. That's part of the explanation, but there's a lot more to it than that. So all that news means that the Fusion Media deal has all but fallen through, since TV was such an important factor of the deal they were trying to get with WCW, but there is still this last hurrah of a pay-per-view, and we'll see how they all do. As far as the major storyline goes, the Magnificent Seven's still going strong, but there is a united front among the babyfaces. DDP, a returning Booker T, Konnan, Hugh Morrus, the Cat, Rey Mysterio and Kidman, I guess. The Rhodes seem to be on their own at the moment. Basically, if you were a heel, then you supported Ric Flair and Magsev, and if you were a babyface, then you were just against all of them. Pretty cut and dry. A curious note: in the final week of programming before the show, Madeja and Animal were both attacked by a mystery assailant, the champion Scott Steiner getting increasingly paranoid, and there's tension within the ranks as everybody is suspicious of everybody else within the group. And with that out of the way, let's begin.
If it's professional wrestling, then it must be Greed.
Okay, off to a weird start already. The show begins with a bonus match, Kwee-Wee versus Jason Jett. Also, I apologize in my last video for Super Brawl Revenge. I mentioned that Kwee-Wee's alter ego was Angry Andy. I meant Angry Alan. My apologies. Jason Jett, the former Easy Money in ECW, he and his weird tights upset Alex Wright in a match last week on Nitro, which earned him this opportunity here. Kwee-Wee with the sneak attack at the beginning of the match, but Jett fights back and hits some big flying moves, grabs him in the pendulum surfboard. Kwee-Wee grabs Jett by the ponytail and lobs him over the top rope. Goes for a dive, but he whiffs it. DDT off the rebound from the ropes. Jett even hits the buckshot lariat, called the afterburner here. Kwee-Wee comes back and backdrops Jett over the corner post to the outside. What a bump. Good follow by the cameraman on the apron, by the way. Angry Alan begins to come out as he gets his heat over Jett. Jett finally coming back from the top turnbuckle, looks to go for a blonde bomber, but somehow Kwee-Wee is able to counter midair into a Hurricane Rana. That could have ended horribly. Kwee-Wee goes for a pile driver, but Jett counters with a low blow. Classic babyface move. Springboard handspring elbow, aka the shockwave. Wants to hit the crash landing, but Kwee-Wee counters. We had a collision out of the corner and Kwee-Wee goes flying out. Jett tells the crowd to be quiet as he decides to take a nap. Kwee-Wee goes up top and goes for an elbow, but Jett rolls out of the way, hits the crash landing to win. I give it 4 stars out of 5. I know that there's no heat or story to this matchup here. It was like thrown together as a bonus match, but I love this opener. It's so fun. Jason Jett was definitely showing up to impress. He definitely did that. He was all over the place, and Kwee-Wee worked really well with him. I think these two had great chemistry, so yeah, very fun opening match. For the last month on TV, we've been seeing a tournament to crown the inaugural Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions, and here's the finals as Rey Mysterio and Kidman take on primetime Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo. Mysterio and Kidman, of course, from the Filthy Animals. Elix Skipper is still part of Team Canada, but he's doing stuff without Storm and Awesome at the moment while in the tournament. Kid Romeo, who was seen very briefly before in WCW and after a couple of vignettes, officially re-debuted as Skipper's mystery partner in the first round. Look at those ugly ass belts. I mean, I could see the design growing on me over time, but they look so basic and cheap here. A quick alley-oop powerbomb by Romeo early on. The baddies get an early start, but Kidman and Mysterio soon fight back. Fighting on the ramp, Kidman hip tosses Skipper into Romeo on the floor, then a double dive off the stage. Back at the ring area, Romeo beats up Kidman on the outside to give his team the advantage. A cartwheel facebuster by Romeo. Finally, Kidman gets some breathing room after a sit-out powerbomb from the top rope. In comes Rey in his very fuzzy pants. He makes a big comeback, hits a senton onto Romeo, gets up and dives outside onto Skipper. Romeo dives outside. He and Skipper eat the Kidman Kazi, the shooting star, off the ropes. Some pinfalls are broken up by each side. Big suplex into a guillotine leg drop on Mysterio. The babyfaces get a big double team move off of their own. Kidman and Skipper tumble to the outside. Rey goes for an Acai moonsault, but Romeo catches him in midair, hits the last kiss to win. Skipper and Romeo are the first ever WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions. I give this one 4 stars out of 5 as well. Just some great Cruiserweight action yet again. 2 matches back to back that are very fun and entertaining. And unlike Super Brawl Revenge, there aren't a whole bunch of botches hither and yon because of slippery ropes or just bad luck and timing or whatever. Just very clean, fun matches. I like the idea of the Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships here in WCW because at this point it feels like the Cruiserweights are getting almost more of an emphasis than they did in 1997 when they were first breaking out with that style. So to have all these Cruiserweights here, but you know they're never going to get past a certain point in the hierarchy, you got to give them something else to fight for besides the one Cruiserweight Championship. So the tag belts do make a lot of sense. Even though I don't like the design, I like the idea of the tag division in the Cruiserweights. Well, last week, MagSev began filming stuff for a documentary all about them. Buff Bagwell was the cameraman before, but tonight he's letting someone else hold the camera so he can get screen time. In MagSev's home base, Flair puts over the rest of his squad and predicts victory for all. Animal says Scott Steiner is ultra paranoid ever since Medeja and Animal were attacked. He's trying to get to the bottom of things. Up next, Bam Bam Bigelow returns to pay-per-view to take on the Mecca of Manhood, Shawn the Star Stasiak. A lot of nicknames there. So last week, Stacy Keibler returned to Nitro after several months away after the pregnancy angle with her and David Flair kind of went bust and the pregnancy was revealed to be false. But she comes to the ring with a big old baby carriage and she wants to introduce the world to her, quote, baby, and it's Shawn Stasiak. So Stasiak by this point has stolen Curt Hennig's music, Rick Rude's finisher, and Ted DiBiase's post-match humiliation ritual. So he's the new love interest for Stacy Keibler, and it turns out their bundle of joy is just a stack of 8x10s that Shawn loves to sign for his opponents after he beats them. Stasiak says he hates all the fat, bald, toothless white trash individuals in the crowd, which brings about the return of Bigelow because those are his people. Shawn powders early on after getting popped in the mouth by Bam Bam, but he gets a cheap shot in the corner. Throws Bigelow into the steps on the outside. Bam Bam with some headbutts. We get a low blow to cut him off though. Bigelow responds in kind. Bigelow with the diving headbutt, but somehow Shawn kicks out. Now Stacy's on the apron. She tries to beguile him with her charms while tossing a can of hairspray to Stasiak. The Mecca of Manhood sprays it in Bam Bam's face, hits his neckbreaker finisher to win. No, Shawn, he doesn't want your signed 8x10. I give it 1 star out of 5. Not much this match, not too long, not too interesting, but I will say I am appreciating the early chemistry of Shawn and Stacy at this point. This match was just based to further their new union and getting them over, but I do like that dynamic with the two of them. I just love Shawn's gimmick right now because like he signs the 8x10s of himself and he puts it on his opponent's chest when he beats them. That is the goofiest thing in the world and I love it. Security footage shows the Cat and Miss Jones have arrived. She wants a piece of Kanyon, but the Cat insists she stay behind. By the way, the security camera footage is just WCW's latest storytelling tool at this point. They've been doing it a lot on Nitro and Thunder and on this pay-per-view. It's all over this show. So basically, instead of just these backstage segments where you have two people talking to each other and there's like an invisible, unseen camera watching all this stuff to show what they're doing, now it's basically a more stripped down version of that where it's just the security camera footage, a more awkward angle as these two characters do their scheming in private. It's also very similar to the F-View that we saw when Bischoff took over Raw early on in the early 2000s, and also kind of similar to the backstage, like hidden camera stuff we saw backstage at Impact. We also see the new Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions celebrating, and there seems to be a whole lot of innuendo there.
Girls are gonna love us tonight. There you go. Come on, baby. Get it in there. Come on. Strap it on. Hey. Come on, champ. Hey, good job, man. You got it.
Up next, Team Canada taking on Hugh Morrus and Konnan, who are part of the babyface contingent. Storm doesn't seem to give a shit or be too upset that he's no longer the commissioner. What a pointless swerve that was last month, yeah? Anyway, time to revisit the Storm erection feud that went on for many months the previous year. Lance Storm wants the Canadian national anthem played, but it's not playing. Storm blames some no-talent American in the back who doesn't know where the play button is. Hugh Morris's music cuts him off and he comes out and they brawl before Konnan comes to even things up. Storm and Morrus start things off, working over Hugh. Early hot tag to Konnan, kind of a modified heart attack by Team Canada. It looked kind of snug. Awesome and Storm work over the K-Dog. They throw him around to the outside, and a big double team as Awesome flies off the top rope. Mike with a pile driver, but not the best angle in the world for the camera. Storm goes for a flying nothing, but Konnan gets the leg up. Konnan rolls over Storm's body to make the tag, which was kind of weird. Morrus is a House of Fire, is a great hot tag here. Goes the top rope and takes a running Awesome bomb, which looks nasty as hell. Team Canada win. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a really good tag team match where I think all four guys play their roles really well. Like, Team Canada, I think Storm and Awesome have some of the best chemistry on this night that I've seen them have at all since I've been watching this era of WCW. They've been okay, but they felt really smooth here. And I think that Hugh Morris's hot tag was great, and I think Conan's job of selling and taking the heat was also strong as well. More hidden camera footage with Dusty and Dustin Rhodes, who are getting ready for their Kiss My Ass tag match with Flair and Jarrett later on. Dusty really wants to put Flair's face in his ass tonight, so much so that he even ordered a platter of, quote, 270 burritos to eat before the match, so I guess he's going to shit all over Flair then. But why is Dustin acting like the burritos themselves smell bad? Is that a trait of burritos I never noticed before? Are they rotten burritos or something? Is there going to be a part in this match where Dusty gets a bad tummy ache and he's got to leave the ring to go to the bathroom, and that leads them to lose the match? So many questions. We go backstage to find Rick Steiner and Buff Bagwell having a chat as the documentarian captures all this. They talk about what Rick's going to do to Booker T, and Buff asks him what's going on with Scott and his paranoia. Rick doesn't seem too worried about it and says everything will get back to normal once he finds out who attacked Medeja and Animal. Elsewhere, the tag champs Palumbo and O'Hare cut a promo. Chuck says only the strong survive, and there are a couple of survivors, and that Luger and Buff will have to kill them to take the belts. In a match for the Cruiserweight Championship, Chavo Guerrero Jr. defends against Sugar Shane Helms, who's debuting the trunks. Gotta give the gal something to look at. Sugar Shane's been on a roll since winning the #1 contendership at Super Brawl Revenge. He's been winning matches. He's got a super cool new entrance now with the Sugar Babies. He's doing great. Meanwhile, the champion Chavo's tried getting a whole bunch of people to help get rid of him. The action starts out with some graps. Chavo with a big clothesline to gain the advantage. Hits a big T-bone suplex. Working over with some holds on Shane's leg. Shane fights out of it, but Chavo regains control. Tony compliments Scott's commentary in the evening, calling it very Gordon Soley-like, and Scott turns it into a joke about Gordon's drinking.
5 points of balance, half physical, half mental.
That'd be 5 pints of bourbon, actually, but enough about that.
Please.
The match goes on. Chavo with a big dive from the top to the outside. Back in the ring, Shane finally gets a run on Chavo, including his knee to the head and a neck breaker. Shane kicks Chavo off the apron, then later Chavo with an inverted DDT with a kind of landing I've never seen before. Still effective though. Shane counters a pump handle into Nightmare on Helms Street, but a rope break. Shane ejects Chavo and does his frog cross body to the outside. Another cross body in the ring. Shane goes up top, but Chavo knocks him down, and look at that bump. Chavo and Shane fight at the top. Chavo looks to get Shane the vertebreaker, but Shane reverses it to one of his own, hits it, and wins to become the new Cruiserweight champion. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. It's my pick for match of the night. All the sneaky stuff that Chavo had been doing for weeks up to this point, and all the winning that Shane's been doing has led to this point. Shane looked like $1 million tonight. Not just debuting the new look, but also winning the match the way he did. And I think Chavo, as has been mentioned often on this channel, can have a good match with just about anybody, and these two really brought it. Just a really great classic story done very well. Documentary time. Flair and Jarrett say they refuse to kiss Dusty's burrito-filled, shit-spraying ass. Then we get a Booker T promo on Rick Steiner, 90% of which is just catchphrases and promo cliches.
And after it's all over with, after it's all said and done, Rick Steiner, all the talk is over. Talking about this, talking about that. Tonight, WCW Greed.
Up next, Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire defend the tag team titles against Totally Buffed. For Best in Chronic last month, Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell earned this title shot. The tag champs, meanwhile, are super over and super dominant at this point. The two have had Lex and Buff's number almost every week lately, including Palumbo with a couple of singles wins over Luger. The challengers are in the ring and Lex runs down his resume as a former champion. Buff talks about he's the best tag wrestler in WCW history. They talk about how they ran Goldberg out at Sin. They run down their opponents in the usual style. They talk for a long time here. O'Haire strikes first and the match starts off hot. There's miscommunication by the challengers, and before we know it, we see two back-to-back Shanton bombs for the champs to win in record time. I'm going to give this a half star out of 5. Now, when I first watched this match, without the proper background of this, I walked away from it very optimistic and wow, they're really strapping the rocket to these young kids. But then when I found out and did more research, it turns out this whole thing is the product of a huge temper tantrum by Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell. They were supposed to lose to Palumbo and O'Haire in about 8 minutes, a full-length match, but they got really pissy about it, so they went into business for themselves, cutting the super long promo. They went home way early, and they laid in the ring for a long time after the bell had rung, which makes everyone look bad. That point makes the whole thing kind of look silly. Bagwell staying in there extra long time, seemingly selling as if he re-broke his neck or something. Just a really awkward thing all the way through. So at first I'm like, yeah, what a cool moment for these young guys. And then you realize, oh, it's just because Bagwell and Luger are dicks. Scott Steiner warming up backstage, then says in his own colorful way he's going to beat Diamond Dallas Page in this Falls Count Anywhere match for the title. Big grudge match up next as Chris Kanyon takes on Ernest the Cat Miller. So since Super Brawl, Canyon's been a bit of a psychopath lately. The night after Super Brawl on Nitro, he hit Miss Jones with a Kanyon cutter, which led to the Cat voluntarily stepping down as commissioner because he was afraid of abusing his power for revenge and didn't want to do that. Not only does that go against how he was in the beginning of his run as commissioner, why the hell did he fight so hard for the last month and a half to hold on to that position and win it back from Storm then? Later, Kanyon tried to possibly murder Miss Jones at the hospital until the Cat made the save in a very drawn out and somewhat unintentionally hilarious brawl. Then Kanyon damn near kills Cat's limo driver M.I. Smooth by flipping over the limo with a damn forklift. Smooth comes back on the go-home Nitro, visibly limping, wanting a piece of Kanyon, gets his ass kicked by Chris though, including several chair shots to the head, but he kept getting up for more and the crowd loved his tenacity. Like, how come that dude's not fighting Kanyon at the pay-per-view? That's the match I want to see. Also, I have to laugh at myself for the timing of my commentary on Miss Jones in my last review about, oh, she's so useless and irrelevant to what's going on in the story. Now she's taking a bump and she's got dialogue. What a turnaround. Look at this cool new entrance for Kanyon. He's rocking a hand brace, by the way, because he apparently injured his hand for real in the M.I. Smooth beatdown. The Cat shows up with Miss Jones. He's on the mic and calls Kanyon ugly. Kanyon makes a beeline for Jones on the outside before Cat cuts him off. Kanyon thinks he's thrown Cat out of the ring, but he skins the Cat, catches Kanyon, does the electric chair drop. Kanyon goes for corner punches but forget that he's injured. Cat powerbombs him and throws him out of the ring. Kanyon drops Cat over the rope and gets his offense in. A top rope clothesline, a springboard elbow, the super rocker dropper. Cat with a window of opportunity with a back suplex, but Kanyon's back on top. Cat fires up and makes the big comeback, even hitting the feedliner, but Kanyon kicks out. Kanyon with a low blow, then just rolls up Cat dirty. We think Kanyon wins, but the referee catches the feet in the ropes. Boston Crab into a rope break, another feedliner, now Kanyon with a rope break. Cat goes for a suplex, but Kanyon hits with a loaded fist. Another kick out, Jones gets on the apron, and suddenly Kanyon lays out the referee. He's begging Miss Jones to get in the ring when Cat grabs him. Jones goes for a kick, but Kanyon ducks and the Cat goes down. Kanyon stares her down, but she's not afraid. She goes for a kick, but Kanyon ducks, but she hits him the second time around, sets up for a third feedliner to win. Cat and Jones go to celebrate, but Kanyon cuts him off, hits the flatliner. Kanyon stalking his prey, but then M.I. Smooth appears and makes the save. I give it 3 stars out of 5. A common thing I keep saying with these Ernest Miller matches, better than I expected. I think the finish was a bit overbooked and could have been a little bit tighter, but besides that, I think they worked pretty well together here, and seeing the story of the evil guy that doing this heinous stuff and getting his comeuppance is a great way to end it. And also, something I never expected, the Cat's associates, the Miss Jones and M.I. Smooth, also getting over as a result of this storyline. Totally Buffed are totally arguing over what happened earlier, but they're able to calm down. Buff realizes the documentarian is still filming all this and gets mad about it. Meanwhile, Dusty's worked all his burritos down to his saddlebag, so he says. Hope he's got his muffler ready. Tony and Scott then kill a lot of time for some reason. Tony with a look on his face that suggests he'd rather be anywhere else. U.S. title on the line as Rick Steiner defends against Booker T. Back at Mayhem, the show that began the Scott Steiner Championship era, Booker T was taken out with an injury and off TV for the last several months, but he returns 1 week after Sin and earns a pinfall win over Scott Steiner in a tag team match. Rick challenges him to a match of his own, but Booker wants it to be for the U.S. title. Steiner working over Booker T outside the ring to start things off. Every time Booker gets a head of steam, Rick cuts him down with gusto. Booker finally gets a moment of hope with a sort of Olympic slam, but Rick takes him down again with a belly-to-belly suplex. Booker fights his way out of the sleeper, and the comeback begins. The scissors kick has now been renamed the Ghetto Blaster. Booker goes for the sidekick, but he hits the referee on accident instead. Why didn't the referee bump for that, though? Trying to get himself over, I bet. Referee finally down. Then Shane Douglas, the former U.S. champ, shows up. We haven't seen him since Rick laid him out with another broken wrist. He decks Steiner with his cast. Booker with the bookend to win. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I think it was an okay match. I think Booker, though, gave a bit too much to Rick, almost to a fault. I think it was too heavily weighted toward the heel in this thing. Shane Douglas coming back was unexpected, but also was kind of a welcome surprise, seeing how the story was told, explaining his write-off earlier, and a good return for Booker T, leaving the world title scene and landing right into the U.S. title picture. Documentary time. Lex Luger walks in on Animal standing over Buff, who's down. Somebody's attacked him. Luger accuses Animal of doing it, but he denies it since he wants to find out who attacked him as well. Whose side is anybody on? In the semi-main event, it's a kiss-my-ass tag team match as the Rhodeses, Dusty and Dustin, take on CEO Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett. So, back in January, Dustin came back to WCW and rejected Ric Flair's offer to join MagSev. In that same segment, Dusty Rhodes makes the save for Dustin, but isn't seen or barely referenced again until right after Super Brawl Revenge, when Jeff Jarrett comes out dressed up like Rhodes, and he sounds like Jeff Jarrett trying to do a Dusty Rhodes voice.
You see, my boy Dustin, fruit of my loins, ooh, if you will, love to come to his rescue and put a clubbering on the chosen one.
I can actually vividly remember going back and forth between Raw and Nitro and this time and seeing Jarrett dressed as Dusty Rhodes, but it didn't mean anything to me because at the time I only kind of knew who Dusty Rhodes was, so a lot of the references were lost on me, but that was very memorable to see flip back and forth and see Jeff Jarrett in a fat suit. 1 week later, Jarrett calls out Dusty, but it's Ric Flair dressed as Rhodes wearing some creepy looking facial prosthetics. Seeing Flair bop around like Dusty given their history together is pretty damn funny. Finally, the real Dusty comes back and has seen enough, and one of the first things he says back is, "I want you to kiss my fat white ass, baby!" And sure enough, that becomes a stipulation, and we have a tag team match happening now. Flair comes to the ring with Animal, not even dressed to wrestle for some reason, looking super casual. In reality, though, Flair was not in the best place mentally. He had come off of rotator cuff surgery the previous year, and really mentally was just worn down after the treatment he received in the company from guys like Vince Russo, who he later said in interviews wasn't as bad as everyone made him out to be, and guys like Eric Bischoff, who he always maintains is still an asshole. But yeah, mentally, he just feels his self-doubt and his self-esteem completely worn down to the bone, was not working out, so he physically didn't feel like he was there, so he could still go, he just didn't look the part that he used to, so he would cover up and he would dress in, when he did wrestle, the rare times he did, he would just dress like this. Scott Hudson brings up that despite all the times Flair and Dusty fought over the years, it's the first time they faced off on an actual honest-to-goodness pay-per-view. And can we talk for a second about how the WCW version of the American Dream theme absolutely sucks?
He's the heartbeat of America.
Flair saying he will not wrestle and that Jarrett will beat up the Rhodeses by himself. Little Nate sending Animal to the back. Flair gives Charles Robinson a shove, who shoves him right back. Okay, so Flair does want to wrestle now. Dustin and Jarrett start things off, and it's all Dustin in the early going, but Jarrett cuts him off, and in comes Flair. Dustin grabs the rope and throws up the deuce before tagging in Dusty. He and Flair hardly have to do anything, and the crowd just loves it. Dusty with the elbows, the flip-flop and fly, before he tags Dustin back in. The ref is distracted, and Flair with a low blow on Dustin, allowing the heels to take over. Jarrett gets the figure 4 locked in until Dustin reverses. Finally, Dustin creating some space. Scott Hudson says Dusty is full of burritos and wants someone to pucker up. Hot tag to Dusty and Flair. Dusty with a run that proves that realism in wrestling is highly overrated. All 4 men in the ring now. Jarrett low blows Dusty. The heels go for stereo figure 4s, but they're reversed. Dustin awkwardly rolls up Flair to win. It's time for the heels to kiss Dusty's ass. Jarrett wants to do a sneak attack, but Dustin cuts him off. He holds Jarrett down and Dusty drops trow, and Hudson goes, "Flair selling the underwear!" And hey, Flair may be at the lowest point of his life, but he won't reduce himself to kissing Dusty's ass. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. Not a great match wrestling-wise, which is pretty disappointing considering who's all involved here, but the spectacle of Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes facing off in the ring for the first time in forever is still a huge moment. And obviously these two guys are not the men they once were, but they were still able to generate such an emotional, raw reaction from the fans by hardly doing anything there in the Coliseum. That was really cool and really special. As far as the gimmick goes, the kiss my ass match gimmick, that didn't need to be there. That felt really shoehorned in, and fans didn't even get the desired result of Flair kissing Dusty's ass, and Flair took the pinfall.
What do you want? You don't understand.
Oh, Shawn. I got this big match tonight against Chuck Palumbo.
A big match? Yeah, a big match in your career.
Be that as may be.
In your main event, a Falls Count Anywhere match, the WCW Championship, as Scott Steiner defends against Diamond Dallas Page. After months of Big Papa Pump taking out guys like Booker, Sting, Sid, Goldberg, and Nash in his reign of terror in WCW, DDP stands alone as the last real opposition to the regime. The build of this one has not been nearly as convoluted as the Kevin Nash build going into Super Bowl Revenge, so I can appreciate that. It's a lot more cut and dry here. It's just more back and forth fighting between Page and his friends and Steiner and his group, the Magnificent Seven. There are some mind games being played by Page where he says he is the hunter now and Scott Steiner's the hunted one. Also, there are those mystery attacks I mentioned earlier. Will we get a resolution on those tonight? Spoiler alert, no. And for one final time on pay-per-view, here's Michael Buffer to introduce the match. Page starts off hot with a big diving clothesline off the top. Brawling on the outside, Steiner takes over. Back at ringside, back in the crowd, there's a random fan with a DDP shirt and crutches hanging out by the Spanish announce table. I'm sure he won't play a factor in this. Oh, never mind, Scott takes one of his crutches. Why is he just chilling there? The kid tosses DDP the other crutch. DDP elbow drops Steiner through a table. Steiner grabs a platter of some kind from a young Paul London in the front row. There's a cameo I didn't expect. But DDP retaliates with one of his own. It's bring your own plastic tray night. Steiner's bleeding now as he works over DDP in the ring, gets him in the bear hug, but DDP fights back. Scott with a belly to belly, but DDP kicks out. He fires up and hits Steiner with a DDT and some turnbuckle attacks. Steiner with a lazy dirty pin and DDP kicks out. Scott counters a diamond cutter attempt with a backslide into a mule kick. We get our third or fourth DDT of the match. Time for my favorite move on the planet, the diamond cutter. DDP goes to the pin, but Rick Steiner pulls out the ref. Another 2 count, and this time DDP flattens Nick Patrick. Belt attack by Big Papa Pump, but we get a kick out by a bloodied Page. A camel clutch leads to a rope break. DDP is just bleeding buckets now. He fights out of the recliner. Medeja brings the lead pipe into the ring and distracts the referee. Steiner with some weak-ass pipe attacks to the back. The recliner's back on. DDP's passed out. Steiner wins and retains. I give it 3 stars out of 5. Not a terrific main event, but it's the best one of the trilogy so far. Way better than Sin and way better than Super Brawl Revenge, so I gotta give him that. You know, it felt a bit rushed in certain sequences, but you know, the aspect of the wild brawl I think really saved this one for me in terms of action and excitement compared to the other main events we've seen so far in this run. The Steiners drape a Michigan flag over DDP's prone body, more pipe attacks after the bell, then we get a montage recapping everything we saw tonight, and that's the show. My grade for WCW Greed is a B-. You know what? It's a pretty good pay-per-view, I think. It's funny because I'm reading the Nitro book as part of my preparation for this project here, and it talks about how bad the mood was backstage upon the news of the cancellation from Turner, and it made everyone perform badly on this show, or it really affected the performance of the show. I didn't see that from watching this. I'm sure the mood was sour there, but I don't think it really affected the performances in a way that I could detect. Not all the matches were great, but the ones that were great really stood out, like the Cruiserweight matches, for instance. And with the tag title match, even though we know that like it went down the way it did because of a big political temper tantrum by Luger and Bagwell, it's still a cool moment and it really makes the champions look good, like to a point. And then, you know, Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair locking up one more time for the first time on pay-per-view, a really cool moment, even if the match itself wasn't spectacular. For a final pay-per-view, there weren't a whole lot of big conclusions at this show, but I think a lot of the stories we saw in individual matches were told really well, made sense, and had the right conclusions. If you want to play a role in determining which shows I look at, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the chance to nominate classic shows for me to review. You know, it's been really fun and educational to go back and watch this era of WCW in a level that I never did the first time around and hadn't really thought about doing in a consecutive way like this at all in the classic pay-per-view review series. So it's been really fun, and for all its faults, I have found this trip through memory lane in WCW rather enjoyable. So much so, I don't think I wanted to end just yet. And I figured I've looked at the last 3 pay-per-views of their existence in 2001. We might as well put a nice little bow on it and look at the final piece of WCW history as we know it, the final WCW Nitro. That's the next time here. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you then.